Welcome to the Private Practice Pro podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping therapists cultivate success. Here's your host, Kelley Stevens.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Private Practice Pro podcast. I'm so excited to have our other Kelley guest here, McKenna. And Kelley, can you introduce yourself and just tell everyone, first of all, where you are right now, like where you're physically located? And then just tell us, you have a big ecosystem of businesses and practice. And so just give us the whole shebang.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Kelley McKenna. Right now I'm sitting in Jersey City in my apartment, but I am actually moving to Miami, Florida at the end of March. So home base will be moving soon. Very excited about that. You can find me on Instagram at Sit with Kelley and at Business of Therapy. So to kind of give you a little bit of background on my story, I was one of the few therapists who was actually taught business stuff in grad school because I got my MSW and my MBA at the same time. I really wanted to become a CEO, work for nonprofits, and kind of like climb that version of a corporate ladder. And I did for a little bit. For like 7 years, I worked in nonprofits with homeless veterans and young adults experiencing homelessness, and oversaw, tons of programs, like $10 million of funding, 65 staff, like thousands of people served. And it was great. But towards the end, I was feeling like an administrator and really, really detached from the work that, we were doing with clients and helping them. And so I decided that I was going to start working for a group practice in the evenings just to kind of be like reconnected to the work. And I saw one client in person, and then the office shut down because of COVID.
No, I didn't know that.
Yes.
That is so funny.
Here's my little way into doing therapy again. And I immediately started seeing clients at home on my laptop. I felt like no affinity to this group practice because, again, I had seen one client one time there. And so I'm like, why? I'm getting all these clients from Psychology Today. Why am I giving half of this income to the group practice owner when I'm sitting on my own couch?
Right.
And so I very quickly was like, nope, I'm going to do this on my own part-time while I'm working my 9-to-5 job in nonprofit management. And I did that for maybe like 6 months. I was seeing clients on insurance panels in the evenings, and I was working like a lot of hours in nonprofit management, but I truly loved the therapy work. And I found myself like so eager and excited to jump on a therapy call. And then when I had to go to like a budget meeting or like employee disciplinary action, I was like, oh, I hate this. And so I started to like dream about, what if I did this full time? What if this was, kind of my thing? And I knew that if I wanted to do that, I did not want to be working like these crazy hours like I was in nonprofit management. I wanted to build a cash pay practice and really do things the right way. And so I started my Instagram page, Sit with Kelley, in October 2020 and decided to stop taking new clients on insurance panels. And things changed really, really quickly for me. My target audience is like anxious millennial women. And so I was really just creating content for them online. And in December, I had 1,000 followers and I got my first cash pay client who paid me $250 a session. And I was like, I cannot freaking believe
you
this.
arrived.
Yes. By February, I quit my full-time job.
Wow.
I was like ready. I had a cash pay practice. I was thriving. And it was just honestly like so incredible. And soon after that, I had a lot of therapists asking me like, how the heck did you do this? You grew so quickly. Like, congrats on going full-time. What's going on? And so I started to coach other therapists on how to do the same. Really how to start your private practice, and more importantly, like to my coaching, how to use social media to fill your caseload with private pay clients. And kind of help people make that transition from, I'm looking for any therapist who's in network with my insurance and will actually answer my email, to like, oh my gosh, Kelley understands exactly what I'm going through. I need her to be my therapist. I'm going to figure out how the out-of-network stuff works. And that has really been so fun, kind of helping other therapists do the same, build 6-figure practices, get full, earn more, work less, the dream.
The dream, isn't it? I mean, I just feel like it's the bet. Like, helping other therapists build their businesses, it seems like something that wouldn't be the most exciting thing in the world, but it's the most exciting thing in the world, at least to me.
I truly love it because I'm helping therapists who help other people, right?
Yeah.
So it feels like you're making such a big impact.
Yeah.
And then like I was really lucky that I happened to get my MBA.
Yeah.
But most therapists were not taught like any of this. And it's really not that hard.
Yeah.
But you need somebody to teach you and show you like, how does accounting work? Like, how do I market myself? Like, what is a niche? Like, how does sales work?
Yeah.
In order to really be effective. But once you figure it out, like you can rinse and repeat. And it's like so amazing.
Totally. I mean, I always think it's shocking that we aren't taught more in school. Like, and I understand why, right? The curriculums teach to the licenses and like they have classes that they have to teach, but it's often shocking to me that you get all the way out of school and you have no, even just practical knowledge about like, how do you get a business license? You know, and things that like you learn in all different other types of schooling, you don't learn to being a therapist, you know?
I think part of it too is like most graduate programs, I feel like don't try and put you into private practice.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they tell you you're never going to make a good living. Like you're going to work in nonprofits forever. You know, all their adjuncts are mostly from nonprofits. They're not from private practices. And I've even had professors where it kind of was like implied that you were a sellout if you went to private practice.
Me too.
Or if you made good money, you know?
I had very few professors who actually worked in private practice. You know, we had like some adjuncts, and I know I do some adjunct teaching and like, but oftentimes like we would just have maybe one class, maybe practicum taught by somebody once every few semesters. So it wasn't often that I even interacted with private practice therapists until after I was done with school, you know?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And, like I got my degree in social work. I had 0 adjuncts in private practice. It was like, this is not even like a discussed career path.
Right.
Which is so wild.
Well, and like, let alone social media. So I thought what we could talk about today to pivot, I'm like the queen of the awkward transition. I feel like on a lot of people's podcasts, you know, it's like, there's this really great transition and like, you know, I just go for whatever. Okay. I want to pick your brain on social media because I feel like this number one is like something you provide training, so much amazing training on. And one thing you didn't mention in your intro, which I'm just going to plug, is you have an amazing Reels membership, which I subscribe to, and I get my email from Kelley every week, the other Kelley. So it's confusing because we're the same name. And where you teach people and give people audios and tutorials on how to make Instagram Reels. But maybe let's talk about when you started in, I think you said October of 2020, going on Instagram. I'm assuming that was your main platform.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have an inkling that you were going to like generate business from Like, did you know that it was going to be, I mean, you have a big following. So like anyone who's listening to you right now, you have a big following. So did you have an idea that that could happen, or what did you think then?
I would say yes and no. So right now I have like 55,000 followers, and that never felt like possible.
Yeah.
I thought that I was going to get maybe 3,000 or 5,000 followers is like a really big reach goal.
Yeah.
And that, you know, I definitely had the goal of getting business. My reason for going on there was to fill my caseload with private pay clients. But I did not expect to build a community of people who I love to like help with anxiety and who cared about what I had to say and who tuned into my stories and asked me questions every day.
Right.
Like that was 100% not in my vision at all.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I know. So I started my page around that same time. I'm trying to think, like, I always think of that as like deep pandemic, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Like I don't think of it in terms of months. I'm like, how old was my son? And like, where were we in the pandemic?
Yeah.
And I think like for at least I felt like it was an interesting time to be a therapist because so many of us were at home. And if I think about even like a couple years prior to that, there weren't really that many therapists on social media, you know?
Yeah.
Or like it was a little taboo. Like I remember for like a hot minute in like 2018. I had like a body image page where I like posted quotes about body image, like, and then I took it down.
Oh my gosh, you're an OG.
I know, right? I had like 30 followers, all of whom were probably related to me.
Yeah.
But even back then, I felt like my colleagues were kind of skeptical. It's like, you're doing what? Whereas now it's, completely different,
And like, I think it's hard because when you're not, now I feel like it's totally different because I follow hundreds of therapists on Instagram and have thousands of therapists follow me on Instagram.
Right.
But at the time, I felt like it was still not that common because when I was on my personal page, I would not see a lot of therapist activity. And so I was actually really embarrassed when I started my page.
Same,
I didn't tell anybody, like not my husband, not my sister, not my parents, not my best friend.
Wait, you didn't tell your husband? When did you find it?
So I told him maybe when I got to like 100 followers, and then I told nobody else until 500. I was so mortified.
Oh my God.
I felt like I was posting to like nobody. I'm like, people can't see this. This is so crazy.
That's hilarious. That's like really funny. So what does your family think now when they like, are they on social media?
Yes. My sister loves it. She's like my assistant. So she makes a lot of my graphics for me. My husband is like the biggest hype man. My parents, they like it, but they're kind of like boomers. So sometimes they're like, I don't get this. I saw you're featured in an article on Huffington Post. Like, can you send me the link? I'm like, if you can see that, you can see the link. Like, just click it, But it's nice. I honestly feel like it's brought me closer in some ways to both my parents and my in-laws because they're like now seeing little snippets of my everyday and they're like, oh, let's talk about this.
I feel like, it gives them a little peek into your life versus like kind of the typical therapist experience of like, we close our door and we see no one ever.
Yeah.
I know like my dad, my dad's in his 70s and like definitely does not know how to work Instagram. And so I made him an Instagram and he only follows me. So like if he opens his phone, it's just me, and he's like, it's weird. Like I open my phone and like you're dancing around and, like, well, he's like, this like, I'm like, maybe you should follow some golfers or something, he's like, but okay. So at this point for your practice, what percentage of your referrals do you think come from social media?
So I like to zoom out when you ask that question.
Yeah.
In which case I would say 100%. And here's why.
Tell me.
So maybe like 60 or 70% are people who actually found me on Instagram, but the other 30 or 40% are referrals from people that I made connections with on Instagram.
Oh, interesting.
And I think that is such an underrated piece of marketing on Instagram that people don't think about.
Yeah.
Like a lot of therapists, when they start their page, they're like, oh my gosh, like the only people that are commenting and engaging with me are other therapists.
Right.
Like, what do I do?
Right.
And I get that that's kind of annoying. Like you want to reach your ideal client, but you're also positioning yourself as an expert in your niche. Right. And so if you can use that Instagram page to build other connections and relationships with people that refer you clients, like who cares? You know, that's an amazing way to get people into your practice.
Totally.
And so, for that reason, 100%.
Do you do any like in-person networking now? Like, do you go out to doctor's offices or schools, or do you do most of your networking online?
I would say most of it is like on Instagram. I've never done like cold messaging.
That's amazing.
I do have a group of therapists who we go and get like coffee maybe once every other month that I met on Instagram that like all live in New York City.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'll take things offline with people, but it's all people that I've connected with already and that we have that rapport, we have that relationship.
Isn't it funny to meet people that you met on Instagram?
I love it. It's so fun.
Like I met you on Instagram. Yeah. It's always so funny to be like, are we real life friends? Are we Instagram friends? Okay. So again, I'm going to do an awkward transition here. So wait, you're moving to Florida, right? So I purposely didn't ask you about this off camera. So what does that involve in terms of your license and your practice? And what does that transition look like?
Yep. So it's been coming for a little while now. I grew up in Florida. I moved to New York after I finished graduate school. And then I moved to Jersey City right across the river during the pandemic because I needed way more space if I was going to be locked inside my house. So when I finished graduate school, I got licensed in New York. When I moved to Jersey, I got licensed in Jersey. And then about a year, maybe 2 years ago, I got licensed in Florida because I knew the plan was to eventually go back.
Yeah.
So I've been licensed in Florida for a while now, and I see clients virtually in all 3 states.
Right.
But from a licensing perspective, like nothing is really changing.
Yeah.
From a business perspective, I did have to incorporate a new business in Florida. My attorney did something called a conversion where he allowed me to keep the same business EIN number from New Jersey and transfer it over to Florida. And now I'm in the process of closing my New Jersey business. And of course you have to update, all your insurance and your super bills and all that stuff with the proper address and documentation. But it's honestly been simpler than I would have thought because I see all my clients virtually in my practice.
Can you see your New York, your existing clients, even if you're moving states out of where they live? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes. My understanding for most states, at least the 3 that I'm licensed in, is that you have to be licensed in both the state where you're sitting and the state where the client lives or where the client is sitting. But they don't have to be the same state.
Yeah. Okay. So California is similar. California is if you want to work with people in California, you have to be licensed in California. And I could be wrong, and I'm sure we're going to get comments about this now that I'm saying it. I'm pretty sure you don't actually have to be sitting in this state, but the client does. So if my clients go to college, for example, technically I'm not supposed to be seeing them when they're in Michigan, if that makes sense. But I could be in Michigan, I think.
Yep, exactly. And call your own licensing board and check if you're trying to work cross state.
But that's a question I get all the time from people. And, I wonder this too for you. So you have a big online following. I'm imagining you get calls from people who are not in some of the states that you're licensed in. Have you ever considered, I know I get this question all the time. Have you considered doing any coaching? What are your thoughts about all of that?
Yeah. So for me, I'm not taking new therapy clients. So it's kind of a non-issue for me. But there is definitely a time in the beginning when every client inquiry felt super important. Yeah. And it was going to make or break my business that I thought should I get licensed in California? I was literally looking into what does that look like? Yeah. So I saw 3% of my followers were there. Yeah. Oh my gosh, maybe I should be doing that. But no, I have not thought about doing anxiety coaching. For me, I really care about and value my license and worked really, really hard for it. Yeah. And I think it is an ethical gray area. I think a lot of people do it and they do it well. And there can totally be a distinct difference between coaching and therapy, but it's not worth the risk for me personally. I stick to business coaching, and that kind of fulfills the desire to be more directive, more goal-oriented. That I have. So
I feel the same way, and that's a question I get a lot of I think as social media expands people's reach of who they're able to reach out to, I think I have a good friend who have been talking about this recently, and it's it's so disheartening, right? You build this big following and then all of a sudden you get an inquiry from Alaska or Florida or something. And, I think number one, it's a chance to reach out to other providers and to send referrals their way. And, I know at least I've asked my attorney a couple times about kind of the scope of, just your individual business. And he's always said, number one, you need a totally separate business, at least here in California. Yeah. He's you need a completely separate S Corp that's specifically for coaching. You need all new paperwork. You need clarity around what is coaching versus what is therapy. And the same thing, what I've called California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, they have a lawyer hotline, which is the bet. I love the lawyer hotline, worth the membership, and they've kind of said the same thing. There's some gray area, where it's not super clear And you want to really protect your license, but it's not always super clear. But I know people do it, you know?
Yeah.
And so,
when therapists ask me, like, I get this question a lot, you're licensed in 3 states. Like, should I do that to fill my caseload? And my advice is always no. Like, I did that because it's been where I've lived since I've been a licensed professional. And I love telling people, like, Google the population of your state.
Yeah.
Right. And it's going to vary depending on where people live. But there's so many people.
Yeah.
I'm like, you need 20 people to fill your caseload.
Yeah.
You can find them in your state.
Yeah.
Don't complicate your life. Don't do extra CEUs. Don't worry about how accounting works and licensure. Just keep your head down, keep doing the marketing, doing the right things, and your caseload will fill.
Yeah, I agree. I say the same thing. I think it's like, I think sometimes it actually does people a disservice. You know, I think when they're
it's
like,
hard from like,
and it's hard from an SEO
standpoint. Yeah, it's so hard.
The internet is like, so I moved to Santa Barbara. Gosh, it's been almost 3 years now. And prior to this, my husband was in med school. So we've lived in different parts of LA. And even LA, LA is a major metropolitan area. So like you can live in LA and still live 2.5 hours away from someone else who lives in LA, you know?
Yeah.
And the internet cannot figure out where I live. Like, and I've spent money on SEO. Like I have an SEO person at this point that helps me. And still, the internet, like, I always think like Google likes local. It likes to know where you live. So it's hard when people will say, okay, I'm going to get licensed in California and Minnesota, and I'm going to try to do like all kinds of online content about that. I'm like, I would pick, if you're going to do it, it's great, but I would pick one. I'd pick one where you're really primarily marketing, and the other one is like, okay, you spent summers in Minnesota. Great. Then do that like as you're like on the ground marketing,
and
go
kind of work
people.
on like networking that way.
Yeah.
Hey, therapists. Are you listening to the show and thinking, I really want to launch my own private practice, but I have no idea where to start? Make sure to check out Kelley's Private Practice Roadmap course. In the course, Kelley gives you the exact steps you need to open your own thriving practice. You can find the link below in the show notes.
Okay, so next pivot.
Yeah,
Let's do it. So can we talk about money a little bit?
About money?
Yeah.
Hell yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so first of all, because I love your Business Insider article, and the title is something like, well, you probably know the title, like therapist made $250,000 in her first year in private practice, right?
Yeah.
You get it right? We'll link it below too. I'm going to link the article about you to below. And when I saw it, Kelley, I fucking loved it, because I think as therapists, money is a bad word. Like we don't want to talk about it, but like, I need money to live. I pay my mortgage. I have a child who's in freaking daycare that costs $1 zillion a month. So for you, when they told you that was the title, did you have any thoughts about that?
Okay. So that article required the most mindset work of my entire life.
Yeah.
I saw Business Insider do a article on like a Instagram coach who I followed.
Yeah.
And I liked the article. So I reached out to the author and was like, hey, I'm a therapist. Like, I'd love to chat. And I actually wanted to talk about how big mental health startups are not great. And that
we're going to go there after this. We're going to talk about it after that. That's our next pivot. Okay. But we got to talk about money first.
Yes. And that therapists don't need to do that.
Yeah.
They can build their own virtual private practice.
Yeah.
So I have an hour interview with this girl. I send her all these pictures. I have to send bank statements and all this stuff to corroborate my story. She sends me the article when it's out. And that is the headline. And I'm like,
wait, you didn't know that was the headline?
No.
Oh my God.
And I spent maybe 24 hours being like, do I share this? This feels like a really big feature.
Yeah.
But I wasn't ready to announce to all of my friends and family,
and your clients.
Yet alone my clients. And I don't remember how many followers I had at the time, maybe 10,000 followers. On the internet, how much money I made.
Yeah.
Because therapists don't talk about money.
Yeah.
And people don't really talk about money that much, especially women don't talk about money.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, wow, we're really exposing myself here. But that made me do so much mindset work around money. And now I'm I'll
Let's
tell you how
talk
much I
about it.
made for every single revenue stream in my business. And I think that it's so important and uplifting.
Yeah.
And that was like something that really came out of the article for me was like, people need to hear this.
People
right?
want to hear it. And that's the thing is like, I teach practicum in a couple grad programs, which is just like for fun. And without fail, every semester, I'll have a couple students come up to me after class, like totally like, I'm so sorry. I don't know if this is a rude question, but I really am wondering because I have student loans and I have to pay my kids and my book. Like, how much money do you make a year? And they're like whispering, I mean, like they're like afraid to ask. And I'll be like, I'm going to tell you the whole class, like, but so why do you think that is? Why are we all so afraid? Yeah. Help me.
I mean, I think that there's so much of like our self-worth tied up in money. I think that, there's also this weird idea that you can't, either you're in this field because you want to do good and you want to help people, or you're in this field because you want to make good money.
Yeah.
And for some reason, people have a hard time conceptualizing that both things can be true.
Yeah.
I can care deeply about my clients and be the best therapist possible to them. And I can want to make a damn good living doing it.
Amen.
And that makes me a better therapist because I don't have to see 35 clients a week.
Yeah.
At which point I could barely keep people's stories straight.
Right.
I'm like, what is your boyfriend's name again?
Right. Or what is your name?
Yeah, I know everyone's boyfriend. I know their cousin. I know their mom.
Right.
I'm like, I'm in it with you.
Right.
Because I have that capacity to be able to show up fully.
Yeah. So I will post a fair amount of content about this, and I imagine you do too.
Yeah.
And I get some serious hate on the internet.
Oh my gosh. The Business Insider article was the most hate I've ever received on the internet.
It's like,
but also the most love. Like that was the most I've ever sold my course for therapists was after that article came out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those, like I get, and it's tough because I think like when you create content that's specifically for therapists, like I remind myself, like this is for therapists. So if I'm a client, then this content isn't necessarily for me. And I think, one thing, and we could talk a little bit about the tech apps and everything too. But I always like say, disclaimer, we're not going to use any names of any tech apps. Okay. So we'll get to that. But, I think it's hard because I think in some ways, at least my opinion would be that like, I think therapists and clients are receiving a lot of the injustices of the same system. So it's like, clients don't have access to really accessible care for a wide variety of reasons, right? Their insurance companies don't pay what they need to. Maybe they only have 5 sessions in network with somebody or 12 sessions in network with somebody. And then they, I can totally understand even in with my insurance, I try to find a therapist that's in my network and either no one's taking clients or their waiting list. Like I know my husband's a psychiatrist. His waiting list is a year long, like, whatever it is. Or therapist waiting lists are just super, super long and they can't get in touch with anyone. And I could get it from the client's perspective. It's really, really challenging. But I think what happens is the clients also don't know that the therapists are in many ways victims of the same system. So if we take insurance, our reimbursements are really low. Also as therapists, we're independent businesses and we still have to pay our rent. We still have to pay our families, mortgage and daycare and everything. And so it's hard when you create content and you're trying to talk about this problem. When clients hear it, I think they just hear like, how could this be that you're not making enough money? Like, I can't even get an appointment with somebody. Everyone who I can get an appointment with is $250 an hour. So I get it from your perspective. I get why I get a lot of trolls, essentially. But I want to be like, but I'm not the person to blame for this. Like, let's talk to, like, let's write in a letter to our insurance company. Here's the template. Like, go send this to them instead of posting on the internet about me, Anyway.
Totally. And I think too, it's like, as therapists, we can't help everybody. And so if you're going to work with 10, 15, let me say that again, my laundry just buzzed. So as therapists, if you're going to work with 10, 15, 20, 25 clients a week, right, you have to do it in a way that works for your business and for your family. And I think there's so many different ways for people to give back that are beyond, seeing clients in network or seeing clients at a sliding scale rate.
Yeah.
Although sliding scale rates are a great way to give back,
Yeah.
right? But done intentionally with a system in place and like for your business versus, you know, my price is always whatever the client needs and not taking into account any of your own needs.
Totally. You know, I always like to say, like, my goal with sliding scale is to provide space for clients who truly can't afford therapy versus making therapists or therapy more convenient for clients, you know? Because if I slide every client $10 or $15, then I'm not able to provide a really low fee spot for someone who wouldn't normally be able to afford my services.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love that.
And it's hard. And okay, so let's talk about tech apps. What do you think about these tech apps, Kelley?
I hate them.
I hate them so much.
I mean, my biggest issue, I think, is like, I have so many issues. What I'll choose to talk about here is I feel like so many therapists feel like that is their only way to go into private practice.
Yeah.
Or to see clients in a part-time way or to have a little side hustle or whatever.
Yeah.
And I wish that more therapists knew how easy it is to start a virtual practice.
Yeah.
Where not just like forget about, I was so annoyed giving 50% of my earnings to a group practice owner.
Right.
Yet alone making $25 a session on a tech app.
Yeah.
Right. Like that to me is unthinkable that you're going to pay therapists that amount. And then there's all the issues with client data and matching and all of that.
I know. And the resource I always like to give people first and foremost is like, okay, if you are in a spot where you like want to get referrals and you are willing to take on some sliding scale clients, like I love OpenPath. I think they're great. And they like pair low fee clients with private practice therapists. And I like them because like, number one, they're a nonprofit. Number two, they're really doing the work to help you find clients that need services, and they're going to send you clients. They have a free directory. You know, I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
But the issue is that I see a lot of these tech apps, again, we can't name any names. So if you're in the comments being like, what about this one? We're not going to answer that. I'll tell you why later. But the issue I think I see with these tech apps is they'll say like, we're making therapy more accessible. That's like the lie. You know, you'll see like, or when I see ads on TikTok or on Instagram, it's like, we're making therapy more accessible to everyone. And it's like, yeah, but the way you're doing that is you're doing what Uber did. You're bottoming out the market. You know, you're like, if you just underpay all the therapists and they get burnt out and they provide a lower quality of care and all the millions of other issues that happen, you're not providing more accessibility. You're just cutting the bottom out of the market.
Yeah. I think the other issue too, and I don't know too much about this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Uber like paid people comparatively to like how taxi drivers are paid, right? But they had like all this investment funding that supplemented the fact that the company was not making a profit.
Right.
Whereas these tech companies are making a shit ton of money and they're paying therapists crap in the process.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So instead of like taking the investors' money at a loss, they are making a lot of therapists not able to afford very much at all. Right. If you have a master's degree and you have student loans and you're making $20, $25 an hour.
Right.
Like, what is that?
No, I mean, and you can't you can't pay your mortgage. You can't be 100%. I mean, it's crazy. And I think like, and we're not hating on Uber. Uber, don't sue us. Uber's too big. We're not going to. That's the other thing. Okay. That's the other thing I'll say about this is the reason it might sound like it's challenging to talk about this is because a lot of these companies have made it challenging to talk about this. So, you know, I know for me, like I legally cannot say the names of certain companies. And that makes it hard too, because I think that there are some good companies coming up. I know like there's a few startups that have started kind of playing around in this space that I think their goal is really to support therapists, but it's hard because some of the bigger tech apps in the mental health space have made it so that if you like speak out and you say this company is not doing things ethically, then they'll sue you, essentially.
Yeah.
So, you know, I always tell people to look for a few things. You know, one, I say like, you got to decide your rate ahead of time. Like, what is your bare
For sure.
minimum? What are you willing to settle for? And then you got to look at whether they're following the law and ethics of your license. Like, you can't assume that because it's a big company that they're doing things the way that they should be, you know?
Yeah. And I think there's so many other ways to surpass that rate and to really help people, right? Like you mentioned OpenPath. I used to be in network with insurance with both Headway and Alma, right? Like there's so many companies that can make that process easier for you if you're just dipping your toe into private practice. Like, do not sell yourself short with these rates.
Oh, 100%.
These ethical practices or like all the texting stuff between sessions, and just don't do it.
Oh, 100. Yeah. I mean, definitely with companies like Headway and Alma, you can be in network with insurance companies and get paid more than tech apps are going to pay
5 times more. Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, it's like really nuts. There was something else I was going to tell you about this. I can't remember. Oh, so I've done a thing on my page where I've like committed to not promoting any companies that don't pay therapists a minimum of $100 per session. I
am obsessed with that.
Yeah. And like my only exception to that is OpenPath, because they're a nonprofit and like they're this is like a way to provide sliding scale clients. It's not like the company profiting off of the fact that you're making little money, you know? They literally make no profit. So it has been fascinating to me. So over the last year, almost 40,000 followers, like I've said this all over the internet. I mean, I've said this every single time a company calls me to advertise about, you know, whatever, every single time, and I have started just responding to DMs like this. Like, if you don't pay therapists a minimum of $100, you know, please don't even bother. If you do, here's the email of my team and we'll talk.
Yeah.
No one. None of them. And I'm not even saying like a typical rate. I'm saying $100. You know?
Yeah, that's so sad.
So sad. Like, and I've had people be like, we're close to that, you know, and I believe some people are, but like, it's crazy to me. You know, like I said it thinking like, oh, there's going to be a couple of them that are like, yeah, we definitely guarantee 100. Let's talk, you know, and I'd be like more than happy to promote those companies. And like, wow.
And I think that's super important, right? Because like your page is all about teaching therapists how to be successful in private practice.
Yeah.
And so if you are promoting things that are paying therapists like not even a living wage, like your values aren't matching and you're not putting your money where your mouth is. And so I think to really say like, no, I'm going to turn down a few $1,000s for a partnership because I know that therapists are worth it. And that's what this page is all about, is like so inspiring.
Yeah, dude. I mean, and it's not even a few thousand. Like, some of the tech companies will pay up to $300 per therapist that you get to sign up on their platform.
Yeah.
And if you think about the followings that you or I have, that's a lot of money. And like, you know, I think like it's like the underbelly of the businesses that we run. It's like you don't see the things we all say no to. And like, I know I was talking to a therapist recently who was at a mental health conference. And there was another therapist just who was a member of one of these platforms, like just going around to get the $300 from each person, like getting people to sign up and being like, you don't even have to see a client, just sign up with my link and then you get $300. And it's like, if you did that, like that could be a whole career. I mean, with that amount of money per referral. But which is shocking to me because it's like, okay, you're willing to spend $300 to get each therapist to sign up. But then you're paying each therapist like $30 to $50 a session. Like, there's something wrong with this math.
Very, very wrong.
Anyway, I could go on for 3 days about this. Sometimes I'm talking about like mental health tech apps to my husband, and he's like, we need to change the subject. Like, he's like, I don't care. Actually,
I love that.
But like, you know, it's still like I go
doesn't care right now.
So, okay, Kelley, I want to know if you were just starting out today and you're a new therapist, what do you feel like is and I didn't prep you for this question, but what do you feel like is your biggest piece of advice? Like, what do therapists need to know about starting their own businesses today?
The first thing I would say is to really, really, really get clear on your niche, because nothing that you do with marketing is going to be effective until you've done that.
Yeah.
Right. Like, no matter what your preferred marketing is, if it's networking, if it's SEO, if it's Instagram, which is my favorite, it's not going to work unless you have a niche. So I think that would be my first piece. And then the second piece would be to really pick one thing and commit to getting good at it.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that as therapists, like, I remember what that feeling was like to have 20 open spots on my caseload and really want to fill them all. There's this desire to do everything all at once. But I think you're a lot better off spending time picking one area and going all in and getting really good at it.
Yeah.
And then working on setting up some other systems in place for your business.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I completely agree with all of those things. Well, Kelley, thank you so much. I'm going to make sure that we link all of your info in the show notes and in the description so everyone will be able to find you. But thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Amazing. It was nice talking with you. And I hope everyone follows Business of Therapy and sit with Kelley and connect. I would love to help you all grow your private practice too.
Awesome. Let's do it. This podcast is sponsored by Simple Practice. I've been using Simple Practice since 2016, which has helped me run a smooth and profitable private practice over the years. It has simplified everything from scheduling to billing, giving me a better balance between the work I'm so passionate about and the family time I'm not willing to miss out on. Check out the episode notes to get a free 2-month trial of Simple Practice, my preferred all-in-one HIPAA-compliant solution. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ask Kelley Anything, my favorite segment of the show. Today, I'm going to be answering a listener question, so here it is.
Hi, Kelley. I'm calling as a master's student right now, and I have a question just about the ethics of kind of my career goals. So I am currently a yoga teacher and a master's student, and I want to eventually open a private practice and potentially open up a yoga studio as well. So I was just listening to episode 3 of your podcast, and I have a lot of qualms about the therapeutic relationship and maintaining, ethics within the therapeutic relationship as like a yoga teacher and also as someone's therapist. So if someone were to come to my class, and especially because I'm going to hopefully own a studio and a private practice, I'm hoping to funnel some of my regular students potentially into therapy if they are hoping to see therapy. But at the same time, I know there's probably a lot of ethical standards to not do that. So I'm just kind of wondering your thoughts on owning these 2 separate businesses and obviously within the therapeutic relationship. All right. Thank you. And I appreciate your podcast and all of your posts so much.
All right. So this is a really interesting question, and there's not going to be kind of one set answer to this. All right. There's a lot of different ways you could approach this one thing. But the very first thing I want to say is I think it is so cool when therapists are multi-talented and when you're able to bring in different parts of yourself into the therapy room. So for you, you're talking about forming 2 separate businesses, a yoga studio and a private practice. Now, through the years, I've actually known some yoga teachers who also have private practices. I've also known a yoga studio here in Santa Barbara where I'm thinking of that has a yoga studio, but also rents some of their offices to therapists part-time. So they've kind of made this wellness center where it's all included in both. And there's going to be different ethics depending on how you do that. And I would say there's going to be some gray area. So the very first thing I think that you kind of need to ask yourself and want to ask yourself is, are these going to be 2 separate businesses, or are you going to have one business? So for example, one business might be a private practice that also does therapy or trauma-informed yoga. An example of a separate business would be where you have a brick and mortar location for your yoga business and a brick and mortar location for your private practice. Now, it's sounding to me like that's what you're thinking, that you're going to kind of have 2 separate businesses. And, if that's the case, which I think that's actually a really good idea, and that's probably how I would do it if I was in your situation, I'm a big believer in your boundaries, right?
I'm a big believer in just keeping things really simple and making sure that you have good boundaries, because here's the thing. You are going to have clients that find out you're a yoga teacher and show up at your yoga class. You're also going to have yoga students who find out you're a therapist and want to seek out therapy with you. You're going to have to take each of those cases on a case-by-case basis, and you're probably going to have some policies and procedures in place so that you have standards for yourself on what situations would occur where I would feel comfortable having a therapy client attend my yoga class or having a yoga student attend therapy. And I think that you have to think about a few different things. One, you need to think about the financial aspects of this, right? If you have a therapy client who you're saying, you really should go to yoga and you should only go to my class, that's not really ethical, right? You might want to refer them to multiple places that they could go to yoga. If you have a yoga student, and let's say you've known them for 20 years or 10 years, and they know everything about your personal life because yoga tends to be, you come in and you talk to teachers and it tends to be a little more casual than the therapy room, then that's not going to be a good fit client for your private practice. So you want to have some written standards or boundaries within yourself for your practice and your business of, these are the types of clients I could interchange. Now, the question that this begs for me is, and if it were me, I would think to myself, do I really need to have crossover clients, right? In an ideal world, you would have enough clients to fill your yoga studio and enough clients to fill your private practice, and you could have no overlap, right? And I would say, I think when we're first starting out in our careers, we can feel like, let's grab one part of my client base and feed this other business. But I would say I would actually make it your long-term goal to have those two businesses stand very independently from one another for a variety of reasons. One of those is liability and malpractice, right? You're going to have separate liability insurance and separate malpractice insurance for both of those businesses. So let's say you're seeing a client in therapy and they come into the yoga studio and there's some issue that comes up in the yoga studio business that causes them to file a malpractice complaint. Now you have this interesting situation where they could sue you through, or they could, file a malpractice complaint through your private practice, but they could also maybe sue your S Corp or sue you in your other business. And all of a sudden you have both businesses intertangled in some sort of lawsuit. So if it were me and at this point in my career, I would say that crossover is really not worth it, even though there are ways to do it. Number one, you really need to consult with a lawyer because I'm not your lawyer and I am not a lawyer either. And then number two, you want to consult with your liability companies, your malpractice insurance companies, and just your insurance companies for general liability insurance for a yoga studio. So if it were me, I would keep it totally separate. I do think there are ways to have some crossover, but I think the best thing to do would be to talk to an attorney about that crossover and get really clear on some policies and procedures for both of your businesses. I know this was a little bit confusing, but I hope that this lined some questions that you could ask yourself and some ways of thinking. And the other thing, and the last thing I want to leave you with is, I think it is 100% possible to build both of these businesses independent from each other and to build an established clientele for both. So I don't think you have to have crossover in order to have a successful business. I hope this helps.
If you would like to be featured on Ask Kelley Anything, I love getting listener questions from you guys. Anything about private practice goes. And the best way to do that is actually just to give me a call and leave me a question on my voicemail. So I'm going to tell you the phone number right now and make sure to write it down. Here it is, 805-243-8241. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.